The definition of suffering is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. But what does that mean? What causes suffering? How do we overcome it? These are questions society has been asking for decades without coming to a complete answer. The truth is, there is no right or wrong answer when trying to understand the depths of one's suffering. Suffering can be experienced by several of different ways, whether after an event or just a feeling in general. Every single person will experience some sort of hardship at some point in their life. But that doesn't answer the question of how do we overcome this. People try and overcome this feeling by several different ways that tend to be unsuccessful. Some may try and get help from family or friends or even a professional, while others try and suppress their emotion. When we focus on the Buddhist teaching concerning suffering, the ways to overcome these feelings are much different. By transforming suffering into joy and peace is something everybody wants but not everyone can achieve. By using the Buddhist way of life, you can learn that suffering is a natural part of life and it truly is to learn a lesson. The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh introduces the core teachings of Buddhism and shows how easily accessible Buddhist teaching are to our daily life. Thich Nhat Hanh expresses his emotions of Buddhism through poetry, metaphors, and real-life examples. He uses inspirational tone to grab the attention of readers and prove how reachable joy is. Your suffering and my suffering are the basic condition for us to answer the Buddha's heart, and for Buddha to enter our hearts. Page 3. By explaining that our pain can bring us joy, Thich Nhat Hanh proves to readers that Buddhism is something everybody can enjoy. Most people who have experienced suffering can learn from this book and use the Buddhist techniques to their advantage. Without suffering, you cannot grow. Without suffering, you cannot get the peace and joy you deserve. Important phrases like this can only be embraced by someone who has experienced suffering before. A common misconception is that everything is suffering, and if we constantly suffer, isn't life suffering? In Buddhism, the answer to this question is yes, but even if life is suffering, we must not let that take over our lives. It is true that the Buddha taught the truth of suffering, but he also taught the truth in dwelling happily in things as they are. To succeed in the practice, we must stop trying to prove that everything is suffering. In fact, we must stop trying to prove anything. If we touch the truth of suffering with our mindfulness, we will be able to recognize and identify our specific suffering and its specific causes, and end our suffering. Page 23. When we focus on the present and stop trying to find the answers to everything, we might find some sort of relief in our suffering. Buddha doesn't have the answers to every single question you might ask, but he helps show guidance and practice ways to learn the answers over time. Buddhism is far different from society's understanding of just meditation and breathing. Buddhism is a way of life. Buddhism focuses on one's breathing to the advantage, but all concerning being truly mindful of our area and experiences around us. Buddhism encourages transformation of emotions and to turn one emotion into another by using many different Buddhist techniques. These techniques include using the 8 elements of path, which include right view, mindfulness, concentration, thinking, speech, action, livelihood, and diligence. When we practice Buddhism, we use these elements to help transform our negative emotions into positive emotions. Our feelings are not separate from us or caused by something outside of us. Our feelings are us, and for that moment, we are our feelings. If we face our feelings with care, affection, and non-violence, we can transform into any kind of energy that is healthy and nourishing. Page 72. When we use right mindfulness, we can recognize what energy is making us suffer and turn our suffering into healing. We all experience difficult emotions, but when we don't allow them to dominate our lives, we will be able to overcome these feelings and grow. Don't run away from things that are unpleasant in order to embrace things that are pleasant. Put your hands in the earth, face the difficulties, and grow from new happiness. Page 94. By focusing on the task of our suffering, we acknowledge that the presence of this hardship and truly try and transform our emotions. The transformation of emotions is difficult and can seem like there is never a way, but by having the Buddha's presence and guidance can help make this transformation reachable. Everything is impermanent. This is a phrase used in Buddhism frequently as a reminder that your feelings and emotions are temporary. When you have a toothache, the pain in your tooth seems to last forever, but in reality, it is only for a short period. Toothache is gone, you feel relief, but only until you have another pain. This relates to all areas of life: love and heartbreak, birth and death, friends and enemies, health and illness. We often state the positive and the negative to prove that everything in life has good and bad. People talk endlessly about their suffering and their joy, but what is there to suffer or be joyful about? Joy from sensual pleasure always leads to pain, and suffering while practicing the way always brings joy. Wherever there's joy, there is suffering. If you want to have no suffering, you must accept no joy. Page 121. When I was growing up, I felt a lot of new emotions that I truly did not know how to deal with. I found myself getting mad at my family for just trying to calm me down and stop going to school because I couldn't get up in the mornings. I felt as if I was in a pitch black room and couldn't find my way out. I told myself to ignore these feelings and hope they would go away on their own. To my surprise, my struggling did not disappear or vanish on its own. At the time, I didn't know what Buddhism was or the benefits and lessons, but I used some of the techniques that helped me tremendously. When I came to my breaking point, which life soon did not make sense, I decided I need to find the source of my suffering. I used the Buddhist technique of right mindfulness to come to the understandings that my troubles at my at-home life was affecting me in unrelated areas. Once I made peace with my struggles, I found that everything was easier to deal with. Started having full days at school, making amends with my family, and talking to close friends about my struggles. I used Buddhist technique without even knowing what Buddhism was. This just comes to show how powerful Buddhism is. Everybody can benefit from the Buddhist way of life without even knowing what the practice is. Buddhists are not just vegans who meditate. They are people like you and me who have an understanding of the world around them. They can transform suffering into peace, joy, and liberty. The truth is, connecting and using Buddhism practices does not make you a Buddhist. It means you understand how helpful and powerful these techniques are. When you have suffered, you know how to appreciate the elements of paradise that are present. If you dwell only in your suffering, you will miss paradise. Don't ignore your suffering, but don't forget to enjoy the wonders of life, for your sake and the benefit of many beings. Page 4. Suffering can take over your life if you allow it to, but when you control your suffering, you are powerful enough to do anything.